At the start of summer every year, the Dao, or Yami people of Lanyu, on Orchid Island in Taiwan, embark on a ritual canoe launching ceremony. These celebrations draw together members of the community from all parts of the island, many of whom appeared in traditional dress. It's conducted to inaugurate new canoes and receive blessings from ancestors who once may have traveled by canoe across the Banshi Channel from what is now the northern Philippines. And for generations, the Dao people have produced exquisitely carved large and small canoes for voyages, transportation, fishing, trade, and other practical purposes. The hand-hewn boats are made up of individual wooden planks carefully fitted together and share similarities with canoes in other areas of the Pacific. They vary in size and detail and require months of work to complete. On some of them, there are striking depictions of their ancestral hero who passed down the traditional skills of boat building and agricultural essentials to Dao existence. There are also large concentric circles at the prow and stern representing the eyes of the vessels, surrounded by small triangles painted in colors of red, white, and black. These different design motifs and styles have made the canoe an iconic marker of the Dao people's reverence for the ocean. Today, Dao canoes are not only used for fishing, but also as tools for political activism and marketing, as objects of artwork and collection, as artifacts of documentation, research, and design, and as key items in a tourist economy. Such reinterpretations raise questions about the commodification and appropriation of traditional practices and knowledge. Today, we aim to find out exactly what it means to appropriate one's culture. I'm your host, Joey Chou, and this is Beyond the Reefs. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socio-economic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world, beyond the reefs of this island nation. In October, an episode on the Canadian version of the Dragon's Den TV show on CBC drew controversy. It's a reality show franchise similar to Shark Tank, where aspiring entrepreneurs pitch business and investment ideas to a panel of venture capitalists, aka the Dragons, in the hope of securing business financing and partnerships. Chinese-Canadian actor Simu Liu, who played Marvel's Shangchi, among other major roles, was one of the dragons on this episode. And when two entrepreneurs from the Canadian Province of Quebec pitched their product, the popping Bobba, Simu protested the brand for cultural appropriation. Netizens on the internet blew up on this issue. On the Cambridge Dictionary, cultural appropriation is defined as the act of taking or using things from a culture that is not your own, especially without showing that you understand or respect this culture. Our guest today is Christopher Chung, a staff reporter at one of Canada's best-known online news sources, the Tai. He's also of Asian descent, and together we're going to unravel exactly what is cultural appropriation.
So my name is Chris Chung. I live in Vancouver, Canada. I was born over here, but my parents are from Hong Kong. And I'm a journalist at a publication called the Tai. We're a news site that covers the province that we're in, which is British Columbia. And I write about a lot of things, but I do really like to write about food. And I am a huge fan of bubble tea. I've been addicted to it ever since I was 7 years old over here. Oh, it was my first time. I had a very cool aunt who was always trying new things, and she bought me just a mango slush with pearls, and I remember thinking it was very unusual. It had the thick straw. The texture really stood out to me. Like I was drinking something, but I was eating something. So it was kind of a shock to the senses. Anytime I travel, of course I have to have a cup. So naturally I have had it in Taiwan, had it in U.S., Vietnam, Singapore, China, a lot of places. I've written a couple of pieces about bubble tea and how it touches on migration and business over here in Canada. Yeah, so I was born over here, so I would consider myself Chinese Canadian, and my parents are from Hong Kong, so we're Cantonese speaking Chinese. But because this is something that was exported over here, it does have that extra cultural dimension as well.
Right, so you were born and raised in Vancouver. I moved to Vancouver when I was 13, after finishing elementary school in Taiwan. So being able to hold a cup of bubble tea in Vancouver back when I think it was early 2000s or even the late 90s, when this cultural beverage started to boom in North America, was quite a joyous moment for me. But what do you think is the cultural significance of this drink outside of Taiwan?
Yeah, so Vancouver, for people who haven't been over here before, it is a very Asian city for North America. I mean, it has had East Asian migration over here for a very, very long time, mostly from southern China, but over the years, a lot more from Hong Kong, a lot more from Taiwan. So, yeah, I mean, it's people think of settlement happening here, and then that kind of being it. But there's a lot of back and forth traffic between, Vancouver and from overseas. And so trends like movies or like fashion or even food trends like bubble tea, that's something that people here really want whatever is updated overseas. So whenever there's something new, we do tend to have it. And bubble tea, particular flavors of bubble tea, that's one of those things. It's interesting because it wasn't as intense as it is right now with a lot of the chains. So I've been trying to track who brought it over first. I think it was in the early 1990s. There's this one place in a city just south of Vancouver called Richmond that's been around since then. It's still around. But when I had it when I was 7 years old, it was just this cool thing that everybody tried to sell. So if you went to some Hong Kong cafes, they would have bubble tea as well. If you went to some pho restaurants, they would sell it too. I think just because they knew people wanted it and they wanted to make money. But of course, the best places to get it was Taiwanese restaurants, and a lot of them happened to open over here near schools. And I think they were really smart with that because it was a very popular after school hangout. It was a very popular late night hangout. Of course, you'd go in, there would be Jay Chow playing. When Jay Chow came to town, there would be posters for the concert, or even when like Easton Chan came to town for his concert, there would be posters for that. For the university, they would have some of those like Asian Canadian clubs, and if you're a member of the club, you could get a discount at the bubble tea shop. So, yeah, I think it was a very cozy space, and it was a very nice hangout space for people who are Asian Canadians. And I think that goes for all types of Asian Canadians. So for people like me, it's a taste of something that is popular overseas. For kids who immigrated here, maybe in their teens, it's something that reminds them of home. And even for people who aren't from that culture, they start to get into it. And for some of my white friends, like bubble tea just became something that's as normal as Starbucks over time. So it was this really nice third space, this like hangout space. And I think it was around like 2014 over here that it really blew up when entrepreneurs tried to bring franchises, so like Cha Time and Coco. And it just really, really took off after that. And yeah, from what I've seen and visited, it's quite a similar story with other overseas Asian communities in Toronto, for example, and in San Francisco as well, and in LA. Like people had that kind of a relationship with bubble tea and their childhood.
Yes, I think I had my first cup of boba tea when I was in my teens. Maybe even earlier than that, but I doubt my family let me have too much sugar in my beverages. So probably more leaning towards 11 or 12 years old, I would have a lot of bubble tea. It is, after all, the pride and joy of Taiwan. And when I held my first cup, after moving to Vancouver, Canada as an international student, definitely brought tears to my eyes. There were quite a few very strictly Taiwanese establishments. There was like a video store that rented out all the old school, Taiwanese or Cantonese, as in productions from Taiwan or Hong Kong, and those were the ones that I enjoyed as a kid. They would have very Taiwanese styled cuisine, as well as, of course, bubble tea front and center on their menu. And I felt a connection with my home when that happened. So when I saw Simu defending this drink, and he himself being Chinese Canadian, not even Taiwanese Canadian, but he knew the cultural significance of boba tea. So when he defended this drink, on Dragon's Den, there were people who sort of wanted to brush him off and saying, "Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" So I want to ask you, Chris, what was your immediate reaction when you heard what he said?
Yeah, I was glad he said what he said. Well, yeah, for people who aren't familiar with Quebec, it is a very French province here in Canada with that history. And over there, the way that food is assimilated is a lot more intense. So I wasn't really surprised that this controversy came out of there. But in terms of the of what happened on the show, I think people have these kinds of conversations all the time when we encounter like fusion food or like new versions of like so-called like ethnic foods. Like, oh what's wrong with doing something new with a food that exists? Like I think in the show, like somebody asks Simu Liu, like, oh, like does bubble tea have to be so traditional? Like, why are you being so worked up about this? So I'm glad that we were having this conversation because Simu Liu wasn't. I didn't see him being a gatekeeper of culture and saying that bubble tea had to be a certain way. He was very specific in unpacking what he thought was wrong with it. And yeah, I was glad that on a Canadian TV show by a public broadcaster we could have that conversation. I totally do think it's cultural appropriation. And I think food is a cultural product, and we see this kind of mixing happen like a lot of the time with food, and we're used to seeing chefs put out fusion food, but it can come about in very different ways. Like to give an example, there's a Korean stew dish called budae, and it was something that came out of scarcity. So fresh meat was expensive, so they used canned products, American products like canned beans and like canned sausages, and then they made a stew out of that, and that's like a dish today. So that's a kind of fusion that came out because people were being creative. And sometimes it might come out of accessibility as well. So Hong Kong is very famous for its cuisine, like Hong Kong Western diner cuisine. And so Hong Kongers weren't able to eat a lot of working class people weren't able to access fancy Western food at hotels. And so in their own way, they were cooking up what they thought it was like in these diners, and they made fusion in a very democratic way. And I think foods like these, they really stand the test of time. It's been really embraced by the people of that place. But I think in the West, when this kind of mixing happens, we do see a lot of people who do it kind of to be trendy, to be edgy, and in a way to be cool. And they are acting as this ambassador that like, hey, if I'm doing this, it's something that makes me worldly. And they also charge a premium for it. And so I think that's why in this particular case it really felt like it was that kind of appropriation because they were putting down what the original thing was. So they were saying, oh, bubble tea is too sugary. And so we're gonna make like a non-sugary version. And everybody knows, like, when you go to a bubble tea shop and you order it, they will ask you for your sugar level. So it's not like that's something that's fixed. And one of the entrepreneurs, they said, like, I'm not sure about what's in bubble tea, so we're gonna make something that was a bit more familiar. But then again, like anybody who is used to this beverage, they will know like very clearly what's in it. And so there were a lot of other put downs in it as well. Like, they're making it more convenient, they're making it healthier. They're making their famous popping boba, first alcoholic boba. And I just felt all of those things were untrue. And I think a lot of netizens felt that as well, because it is a convenient thing. You would pick it up. It's part of street life. It's part of walking around a night market. If you want to be healthy, then, maybe you should be drinking water instead. Or maybe you can order a tea that doesn't have sugar or cream. Like that's the beauty of bubble tea because it is a very democratic beverage. And it has a very wide menu. It's a drink that's still evolving today. And so I felt like it was disingenuous for the entrepreneurs to say that, like, this is our impression of how it is, and we're going to make it better. And I can understand why Simu Liu was quite offended by that take on it. I think one of the problems too was that, what was the attitude they were coming into this project with? I think there was a bit of an ego. There's a bit of like, hey, like we know how to improve this, we know how to make it better. And yeah, coming from somebody who does not belong to that culture or seems to have a familiarity with that culture, I think that's what really offended people.
Yes, definitely the expats, the Taiwan expats in Canada, in the US, in Australia, they were not happy with this. And I think when we talk about netizens online who publicly criticize this company for doing what they did, it's mainly from this demographic, the Taiwanese diaspora or the Asian diaspora, who are familiar with the drink. But funny enough, if you ask Taiwanese people, like local Taiwanese, what they think, many of them would tend to think that this is more cultural appreciation than appropriation, which is interesting that Taiwanese people don't really have the sensitivity to catch a red flag with these sort of things, given the island's colonial past. So I want to ask you, Chris, was there, first off, what do you think? Is this cultural appropriation or is it appreciation? And you sort of already said that you definitely think it's appropriation. But now I want to ask you, was there any way the Quebecois could have done a better job selling this drink, presenting this drink, to make it okay for them to step into this cultural realm and profit from it? The same way that I would ask you, myself being Asian, I would probably never pretend to think that I understand, for example, a very cultural food like shawarma and think that I can make it. But if I were to do that, what would be the preconditions for me to do it? Obviously, going by the Cambridge Dictionary, cultural appropriation is when you use something without fully understanding it. So if the Quebec entrepreneurs fully understood the history and the cultural significance of boba tea, do you think there's a chance for them to step into this world?
Yeah, it is a very tricky thing. I think if there was some sort of homage, some kind of nod to its origins, I think that would be great to kind of explain like why this is important to them. I always thinking about the audience because, are they making this drink for I don't know, what would a Taiwanese audience think of this? Like, of course they're catering this to a white audience. And so it's more limited in that way. And I don't know how much it costs, but I'd be very curious about like, are they charging a premium to their audience as well, or does it cost as much as other bubble teas? Yeah, so I think they're quite misleading in what they're advertising it as. Like they're advertising it as like this is superior to bubble tea because of these reasons.
All right, so thank you, Chris. And I think a brief summary. Today, we talked about what exactly is cultural appropriation, especially in light of this recent occurrence with boba tea. I think the Canadian entrepreneurs, not only did they not seem to fully understand the culture, they definitely made it seem like they can do a better version of it than the people who have already done so. And I think that's what angered a lot of people online. And like Chris said, Simu Liu was not gatekeeping this cultural icon, rather questioning whether the entrepreneurs truly understand this part of culture. Because after all, bubble tea and even the tea industry in Taiwan was only made possible by European involvement, right? It was the Dutch East India Company in the 1600s that really stimulated Taiwan's tea export and tea industry. Then, of course, the bubble tea was the first version of it anyway, was created in Middle Taiwan in either Taichung or Tainan in the 1980s. However, boba itself, the pearls that we use, the tapioca balls, they are from a plant that originated from South America that was likely brought over by the same company, the Dutch East India Company. To make this drink possible in the first place, there had to be some European involvement. So the problem was never about who gets to sell this drink, rather to fully appreciate it before you put it on your menu. I'm Joey Chou, and you've been listening to Beyond the Reefs.